Have you ever noticed how some loves don't end? They just get interrupted? This isn't a story about fame, or money, or even music, at least not at first. It's about two young hearts in a small American town who believed love alone could beat power. About a boy with a guitar, a girl with dark eyes, and a promise that felt stronger than the world. What happens when love is forbidden, dreams are crushed, and silence replaces goodbye? What happens when pain turns into music, and music turns into power? And what happens when a man comes back, not to beg, but to choose love again? Stay with me, because this story will take you from innocent teenage promises, through rejection, distance, success, emptiness, and finally, a reunion that changes everything. And before it ends, you'll understand why some songs don't just tell stories. They carry them. If this story touches you at any point, don't forget to like the video. And subscribe to the channel, because stories like this are just getting started. It all started on a slow summer afternoon in a small town outside Nashville, the kind of place where everyone waves from their porch and time feels generous. He was just a skinny American kid with a beat-up pickup truck and a guitar always resting in the back seat. She had dark eyes that stopped conversations mid-sentence, the kind that made people forget what they were about to say. When their eyes met for the first time, it wasn't dramatic, it was quiet, and somehow that made it heavier. No fireworks, no music playing in the background, just a pause in the world. He felt something settle in his chest, warm and terrifying at the same time. And without knowing why, he smiled like he had just found home. They became inseparable the way teenagers do, fast and without permission from reality. Long walks through cornfields, late-night talks sitting on the hood of his truck, sharing cheap milkshakes at roadside diners. They spoke about forever like it was a plan, not a dream, like it was already written somewhere. He promised he'd play music for her every night, even if the world never listened. She promised she'd be there in the front row of his life, no matter how small the stage was. Their love was clumsy, hopeful, and wildly sincere. The kind of love that believes nothing bad could ever touch it. Music became their secret language. He played his guitar under the open sky while she sat cross-legged on the grass, eyes closed, feeling every note. Sometimes he missed chords, sometimes his voice cracked, but she never noticed. To her, every song sounded like truth. To him, every lyric was secretly about her, even when it wasn't. Those moments felt eternal, like time had agreed to slow down just for them. And in that innocence, they felt unstoppable. They dreamed loud and without shame. He talked about becoming a country singer, not famous, just heard. She talked about a life where love mattered more than money, where mornings were slow and nights were full. They imagined a small house, a porch swing, maybe kids running barefoot in the yard. No fear, no limits, no outside voices telling them who they should be. Just two hearts making promises the world hadn't tested yet. And they believed every single word. But innocence has a fragile beauty. They didn't notice how different their worlds really were. He came from long days of work, grease-stained hands, and honest effort. She came from comfort, tradition, and a last name that carried weight in that town. To them, none of that mattered. Love felt bigger than background. They laughed like nothing could ever interfere. That's usually when life starts paying attention. Every goodbye felt temporary, every hug felt like protection. They held each other like tomorrow was guaranteed. He kissed her forehead and said, "We'll be fine, you'll see." She believed him, because love at that age doesn't know how to doubt yet. Their hearts were full, light, and fearless. They didn't know storms were forming just beyond the horizon. And somewhere close, power was already watching them fall in love. That first chapter of their story was pure, untouched, and painfully honest. A love born before pride, money, or fear had a voice. But innocence doesn't last forever. It only prepares you. Because when love meets power, something always breaks. And in their small American town, someone with authority was about to speak. The kind of voice that doesn't ask, only decides. And that's where everything would begin to change. Power didn't arrive loudly at first. It showed up in silence, in cold looks, in doors that suddenly felt heavier to open. Her father was a man whose name carried weight across counties, not just acres. Ranches, land, cattle, influence. He owned things people didn't dare question. When he looked at the boy with the guitar, He didn't see love. He saw risk, instability, a future that couldn't be controlled. And powerful men hate what they can't control. The first confrontation wasn't violent, just final. He called the young man into his office, walls lined with trophies and old photographs. A firm handshake, a measured voice, eyes sharp like a blade. He spoke about reality, about responsibility, about knowing your place. Music, he said, was a hobby, not a future. Love, he implied, doesn't pay bills or protect a family name. And dreams, in his world, were liabilities. The boy listened, nodding politely, heart pounding like a drum in his chest. Every word felt smaller than the one before it. He tried to speak about commitment, about promises, about working hard. The man cut him off with a single raised hand. There was no anger, no shouting, just authority. The kind that doesn't need volume to hurt. The kind that ends conversations before they begin. For the girl, power arrived as confinement. Suddenly, rides were supervised, calls unanswered, schedules controlled. Her freedom shrank without explanation. Love was labeled a phase, something she'd grow out of. Her father spoke calmly, but his words carried steel. "This ends now," he said, as if it were a business deal. And in that moment, childhood quietly disappeared. They tried to fight it in whispers. Secret notes, glances across fences, short moments stolen from watchful eyes. Every meeting felt like a rebellion. Every goodbye felt heavier than the last. Love was no longer simple, it was dangerous. And danger makes young hearts beat louder. But it also makes them vulnerable. Power doesn't argue with love, it tests it. It waits, confident that time and pressure will do the work. The father believed money always won in the end. He believed the boy would eventually leave. He believed his daughter would eventually forget. After all, power had never failed him before. Why would it start now? The town felt different after that. Porches felt judgmental, roads felt narrower, smiles felt forced. The boy could feel eyes following him wherever he went. He was suddenly aware of how small he was in that world. Love was still there, strong and real, but surrounded. And when love is surrounded, it has two choices: break or run. The rejection didn't feel real at first. It felt like one of those moments where the mind refuses to accept what the ears just heard. Her father's words echoed in the room, but they didn't land right away. "This is over." So simple. So final. No explanation long enough to soften it. Just a sentence capable of ending entire futures. She stood there, breathing shallow, eyes burning, hands trembling at her sides. She tried to speak, but her voice came out smaller than she expected. She talked about love, about loyalty, about how they had promised each other everything. Her father listened without interrupting, arms crossed, expression unreadable. When she finished, he sighed, not in anger, but in disappointment. And disappointment hurt more than shouting ever could. Because it meant he had already made peace with destroying her happiness. He told her love fades, but money doesn't. That dreams don't protect families, power does. That men like the boy with the guitar come and go. He spoke like a man who had never lost anything he wanted. And when she realized he truly believed he was doing the right thing, fear settled in. Because you can't argue with someone who thinks they're saving you. You can only lose. For him, the rejection took shape in unanswered days. One day passed. Then another. The phone stayed silent on the nightstand, mocking his hope. He checked it obsessively, even knowing there would be nothing. He drove past her house more than once, slow enough to notice every detail. The lights were on, life was happening inside, just without him. And that absence hurt worse than a slammed door. He tried to distract himself with work, with noise, with people. Nothing worked. Every song on the radio sounded like betrayal. Every place they used to go felt haunted. He remembered the way she laughed, the way she listened to his music like it mattered. Now those memories felt dangerous, like stepping on broken glass. Because they made the present unbearable. At night, the loneliness got louder. He lay awake, staring into darkness, replaying moments that no longer existed. He questioned every choice he had ever made. Should he have fought harder? Spoken differently? Been more than he was? Rejection has a cruel way of making you blame yourself. Even when you did nothing wrong. Even when love was real. She suffered in a different way, quieter but just as deep. Her world shrank overnight. Conversations were supervised, outings cancelled, freedom rationed. She smiled when expected, nodded when corrected. Inside, she felt like she was slowly disappearing. She missed him in ways that words couldn't capture. And missing someone you're not allowed to see is a special kind of pain. She wrote letters she never planned to send. She replayed his voice in her head just to feel close to him again. At night, she stared at the ceiling and wondered if he thought she had abandoned him. That thought alone made her chest tighten. Love doesn't die when forbidden. It turns into longing, regret, and unanswered questions. And those linger. The wound between them stayed open because there was no ending. No goodbye kiss. No last conversation. Just separation enforced by power. And unresolved love has weight. It follows you into every decision. It colors every future plan. And slowly, it demands action. For him, the pain became a signal. Staying meant suffocating. Staying meant watching his dreams rot in the same place they were crushed. Every street reminded him of what he lost. Every silence screamed her name. And one night, sitting alone with his guitar, he understood something clearly. If he stayed, he would disappear. That was the moment the wound turned into movement. Not healing, movement. Because sometimes you don't leave to forget. You leave to survive. And deep down, he knew this wasn't the end of the story. It was the break B. For something else began. Something that would change everything. Leaving didn't feel brave. It felt necessary. On a quiet morning, before the sun fully rose, he packed what little he had into that old pickup truck. A duffel bag, worn boots, a guitar case scarred by time and hope. No crowd waving goodbye, no dramatic speech. Just a town slowly disappearing in the rearview mirror. And a heart carrying more pain than luggage. The road stretched endlessly toward the city, mile after mile of open asphalt. He drove with the windows down, letting the wind burn his eyes. Country radio played softly, songs about love and loss that felt written just for him. Every lyric cut deep, but he didn't turn it off. Pain had become fuel. If he was going to survive, he needed to feel everything, even the parts that hurt the most. The city welcomed him without warmth. Nashville was louder, faster, indifferent. Neon lights, crowded streets, bars overflowing with voices and dreams. Everyone there wanted the same thing, to be heard. He realized quickly that talent wasn't rare. Persistence was. And loneliness was everywhere. Days blurred into nights. He played wherever they'd let him. Small bars, street corners, dim rooms where no one really listened. Sometimes he played for tips. Sometimes for nothing at all. Some nights he went home with just enough money for cheap food. Other nights, just with silence. But every note carried her name. He slept in cramped rooms, shared apartments, sometimes his truck. Life stripped him down to essentials. No comfort, no safety net, no guarantees. Just his voice, his guitar, and the stories burning inside his chest. Rejection followed him here too. Auditions ended quickly. Doors closed without explanation. But something changed in him during those nights. The pain sharpened his sound. His voice grew rougher, deeper, more honest. When he sang about loss, people finally listened. Because they could hear it wasn't pretend. It was lived. It was real. Music stopped being a dream and became survival. Every song was a confession. Every performance felt like bleeding in public. He wasn't chasing fame anymore. He was chasing meaning. Trying to turn heartbreak into something useful. Something that could carry him forward. Somewhere between empty rooms and endless roads, he made a quiet promise. He wouldn't go back broken. He wouldn't return empty-handed. If love had been taken from him, he'd build something strong enough to stand against power. Not out of revenge, but out of dignity. And deep down, he believed she was still listening somewhere. Waiting. Because leaving wasn't the end of love. It was the beginning of becoming someone worthy of fighting for it again. Success didn't announce itself with fireworks or headlines. It crept in quietly, almost shy, through small openings he didn't even notice at first. One song shared by the wrong person at the right time. One night where the room fell silent instead of distracted. One stranger who stayed until the last chord faded. None of it felt big in the moment. But looking back, that's how everything began to shift. The first year was pure survival disguised as ambition. He drove thousands of miles on empty highways, chasing stages no one remembered. Sometimes he played to full rooms, sometimes to half-empty bars. He slept wherever exhaustion won, cheap motels, couches, even the back of the bus. Money came and went fast. Dreams stayed. And pain kept sharpening his voice. Rejection didn't disappear, it just changed tone. Instead of no, he heard not yet. Instead of silence, he heard excuses. He learned to smile through disappointment. To shake hands with people who forgot his name 5 minutes later. Every door half open felt like progress. And progress became addictive. The second year brought recognition he wasn't prepared for. His songs started climbing playlists, then radio rotations. Strangers recognized his voice before his face. He signed contracts he read twice but still didn't fully trust. Money stopped being a daily worry and became an abstract concept. But time vanished completely. Weeks blurred into airports, stages, and late-night drives. He performed night after night, voice raw, heart exposed. Crowds sang lyrics back to him, words born from his heartbreak. Applause felt surreal. Validation felt intoxicating. But exhaustion crept in quietly. There was always another city waiting. Another expectation to meet. By the third year, success turned heavy. The schedule became brutal, unforgiving. Interviews replaced silence. Decisions were made by teams instead of instinct. His face appeared on billboards, then magazine covers. People called it luck. He called it sacrifice catching up. Hotel rooms all started to look the same. Clean, quiet, empty. At night, he'd sit alone with his guitar and stare at the ceiling. Money lay untouched on tables. Awards collected dust. And memories refused to leave him alone. Success filled rooms, but not the spaces inside him. He missed the simplicity of being unknown. The nights when music was about connection, not performance. He wondered if he had traded something priceless for recognition. Fame felt loud, demanding, relentless. Love felt distant, fragile, unresolved. And the distance between those two worlds hurt more than poverty ever had. Because now, he had everything, except what mattered most. 3 years changed his life on paper. They didn't heal his heart. The wound that started it all stayed open, quietly shaping every song. Success answered the world's questions. But it didn't answer his. And slowly, a realization began to grow. If success couldn't replace love, maybe it was time to go back. From the outside, his life looked perfect. Big stages, sold-out crowds, headlines calling him the next big thing in country music. Money flowed easily now, numbers on a screen growing without effort. He owned things he once only dreamed of: cars, houses, freedom. But perfection from the outside is often silence on the inside. And silence can be deafening, especially when love is missing. He woke up in expensive rooms that didn't feel like his. Sheets too clean, walls too empty. He could order anything, go anywhere, buy almost anyone's time. But time with her wasn't for sale. Success gave him control over his schedule. Power gave him options. None of them filled the space she left behind. At dinners with industry people, laughter sounded rehearsed. Compliments came easily, but they felt weightless. Everyone wanted something from him now: access, attention, approval. No one asked who he missed. No one asked what kept him awake at night. They saw the artist, not the man. And being unseen hurts more when you're surrounded. Money changed how people treated him. Old doors opened without resistance. Strangers respected him before knowing him. But respect without connection feels hollow. He missed being known, truly known. Missed someone who loved him before the fame, before the power, before the noise. Some nights, he drove alone through city streets, radio off, windows down. No destination, just movement. He thought about the life they imagined back then, simple, honest, shared. He wondered if she still remembered his voice the same way. If she ever heard his songs and recognized herself in them. Those thoughts followed him everywhere. No amount of success could outrun them. The irony hit him hard. He had become the kind of man her father respected. Financially secure. Influential. Powerful in ways that once felt impossible. Yet the victory felt unfinished. Because the one person he wanted to share it with wasn't there. And success without love feels like standing on a stage alone. He realized something painful but clear. He hadn't chased success to prove himself to the world. He had chased it to come back different. Stronger. Worthy. And now that he was all those things, staying away felt wrong. Staying away felt like betrayal. Money gave him freedom. Power gave him leverage. But love gave him direction. And without it, everything felt off balance. The emptiness became impossible to ignore. And slowly, a decision formed. It was time to go back, not as the boy who left, but as the man he became. Coming back didn't feel like victory. It felt like walking into a memory that never healed. The road back to town was long, quiet, and heavy with thought. Every mile pulled something out of him: regret, hope, fear, courage. This time, he wasn't running from pain. He was driving straight into it. And that takes more strength than leaving ever did. The town appeared slowly, like it was rising out of the past. Same gas station. Same diner. Same faded signs. But everything felt smaller now, almost fragile. Not because the town had changed, but because he had. He parked the car and stayed inside for a moment, breathing deeply. Fame stayed in the trunk. Money stayed in the bank. Only the man stepped out. She saw him before she believed it was real. At first, she thought memory was playing tricks on her. That happens when you miss someone for too long. But then he turned, and there was no doubt. Older. Calmer. Stronger. Not hardened. Shaped. Her heart reacted before her mind allowed it. Years collapsed into a single heartbeat. Their eyes met, and the world slowed down around them. Cars passed. People talked. Life continued. But for them, everything paused. That look carried every unsent letter, every forbidden thought, every night spent wondering. It wasn't the innocence of youth anymore. It was recognition. A deep, quiet understanding that something unfinished had returned. And it demanded attention. They stood there longer than necessary, neither knowing how to begin. Words felt too small for what had survived. He wanted to reach for her, but didn't. She wanted to close the distance, but hesitated. Time had taught them caution. Love was still there, undeniable. But now it came with memory, pain, and respect. And that made it heavier, and more real. When they finally spoke, their voices trembled just enough to be noticed. They talked about simple things first, like strangers pretending not to recognize destiny. "How have you been?" "Life's been life." Every sentence hid 1,000 others underneath. They avoided the past, even though it stood between them. Because touching it too soon might break them again. And neither could afford that. They walked together like they used to, side by side, not touching. The same streets, but different steps. Silence filled the spaces between their words, thick with emotion. He noticed how she still listened fully, like every word mattered. She noticed how he carried himself now, grounded and certain. Distance hadn't erased attraction, it had refined it. What once burned now glowed, steady and dangerous. And both of them felt it. Eventually, truth found its way in. He spoke about leaving, about the city, about becoming someone else. Not to impress her, but to explain the years he lost. She spoke about staying, about obedience, about loving him quietly. About choosing survival when rebellion wasn't an option. They realized something painful and beautiful at the same time. They hadn't abandoned each other. They had endured in parallel. And endurance leaves marks. The tension between them was undeniable now. Not just desire, but recognition. The kind that comes from shared scars. They stood close enough to feel each other's breath. Every instinct screamed to close the gap. But this wasn't teenage urgency anymore. This was adult certainty forming slowly. And certainty doesn't rush, it commits. As the sun lowered, he understood something clearly. He hadn't come back to prove anything. Not to her father. Not to the town. Not even to himself. He came back because love had never released him. Because no amount of success had replaced her absence. And because some stories refused to end quietly. She looked at him and saw the boy she loved and the man he became. And in that moment, she knew waiting hadn't been a mistake. Time hadn't wasted them. It had prepared them. Prepared them to choose each other freely this time. Without fear. Without permission. And without anyone standing between them again. And standing there together, under a sky that once heard his first songs. They both knew the final chapter was no longer a dream. It was close. And this time, nothing would take it away. The ending didn't arrive suddenly. It unfolded slowly, the way real victories do. After the reunion, nothing was rushed, nothing was forced. They gave themselves time to exist again, to breathe in each other's presence. Love, once stolen from them, was now chosen freely. And choice made it stronger than it had ever been before. This wasn't a fairy tale return. It was a conscious rebuilding. He didn't hide who he had become. The success, the money, the influence, he carried it calmly, without arrogance. And she didn't fall in love with the fame. She fell in love with a man who never forgot her, even when the world applauded him. They talked about the past honestly, without bitterness. Pain was acknowledged, not erased. Because healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means understanding what survived. Eventually, there was no avoiding the confrontation with her father. Not out of revenge, but out of closure. The meeting happened on the same land where love had once been forbidden. The same fences. The same wide fields. But the balance of power had shifted completely. This time, the man with the guitar wasn't asking for permission. He was standing as an equal. Her father recognized it immediately. Not just the money. Not just the influence. But the certainty. The kind that can't be bought or intimidated. The boy he once dismissed was gone. In his place stood a man who had built himself without shortcuts. And for the first time, authority didn't speak first. It listened. That silence felt like justice. There were no threats, no ultimatums. Just truth. He spoke calmly, firmly, without anger. About love. About distance. About becoming something stronger than rejection. Her father didn't apologize. Men like him rarely do. But he stepped aside. And sometimes, stepping aside is the loudest admission there is. With nothing left standing in their way, life finally opened. They chose each other openly, without fear of consequences. Mornings were shared, not imagined. Nights were filled with conversation instead of longing. He still traveled for music, but now there was someone waiting. Someone who belonged there, not temporarily, but permanently. Love stopped being something they defended. It became something they lived. The wedding wasn't extravagant. It didn't need to be. It was honest, grounded, deeply emotional. Friends, family, open sky, music playing softly in the background. When he stood there waiting for her, guitar resting nearby, he smiled differently. Not like a performer. Like a man who had come full circle. And when she walked toward him, every sacrifice made sense. Their vows weren't poetic. They were real. Promises shaped by loss, patience, and endurance. To choose each other every day. To never let power speak louder than love again. To protect what once was fragile. When he kissed her, the crowd cheered, but quietly. As if everyone understood this wasn't just a wedding. It was a victory. They built a life that balanced both worlds. Music and silence. Success and simplicity. He still sang about love, but now from peace instead of pain. And when people asked where his best songs came from, he never hesitated. "They came from a girl I almost lost," he'd say. And she would smile, knowing some loves don't break. They wait. And in the end, the story proved something timeless. Love doesn't need permission. It needs courage, endurance, and time. The boy who once had nothing but a dream came back with everything. Not to win, but to share. And the girl who waited learned that love delayed is not love denied. It's love tested. And there's past every test. Some stories don't end when the music fades. They stay with us, echoing in the quiet moments, asking questions we don't always want to answer. Was it love that saved them, or time? Was it courage, or destiny, or simply the refusal to give up on something real? Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever loved someone you were forced to let go of? Do you believe love should fight power, or walk away and wait? And if this story were a song in your life, which one would it be? Drop the name of a song in the comments, because your suggestion might become our next story. If you felt something here, don't let it end in silence. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and stay with us. Because here, music doesn't just play. It becomes a story you've never heard told this way before.